In one single day, 4 men came to his ranch. 4 men wanted the same thing: his land, his signature, his defeat dressed up as a deal. The railroad man offered him pennies on the dollar. His own cousin offered him half price wrapped in family love. The church elder offered him a plaque on a wall in exchange for everything his father had bled for. And the banker came last with a note that would take the ground from under his feet in 30 days. Not one of them asked if he had slept the night before. Not one asked if he had eaten. Not one noticed that his right shoulder sat lower than his left, the mark of a man who had carried too much for too long. Then a fifth visitor came, a woman in a faded linen dress. She stepped down from her buggy, looked him over the way a carpenter looks at a beam that has carried weight for years, and asked him a question he had not heard since his mother died 12 years before. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you heartfelt Western frontier stories about cowboy love, the quiet courage of mothers, the tenderness between strangers, and the moments when one simple act of kindness can change a life. This story will remind you that a person's worth can never be measured by a balance sheet, and that sometimes the deepest healing begins with a single honest question. If this story moves you, please like this video, leave a comment telling us what the question meant to you, share it with someone who has been carrying too much alone, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss the stories that find their way to your heart.
Late afternoon, 4 o'clock, August 1878. Caleb Hartley was digging the last post hole on the west fence line. The ground was hot, the kind of heat West Texans call dog's breath hour, the hour when the earth breathes fire back up at the sky. The shovel bit dry soil. The sound was like something biting down on bone. He stopped, drank from a cracked ceramic jug, the one his mother had glued back together before she died. He wasn't thinking of his mother when he drank. He was thinking about 30 days. 30 days until the bank note came due. The wind shifted. He looked up, dust rising on the road from Bitter Creek. A buggy, the first visitor of the day. The buggy pulled into the yard. A man stepped down. Gray vest, city boots, a sheaf of papers with the Texas and Pacific Railroad seal pressed into the top page. Silas Grimes. Caleb had heard the name. Grimes walked over, held out a gloved hand. Caleb did not take it. He had dirt on his palms, and Grimes knew it. Grimes said, "Mr. Hartley, do you believe railroads are the future?" Caleb said, "Depends on whose land they cross." Grimes smiled. He had a smile like a man counting money in his head. "Your land lies directly on the proposed line. The company is prepared to offer $1,800 for the entire 640 acres. Caleb stared at him. 1,800. For land his father had broken his back over. For water his grandfather had dug down 40 feet to find. "No," Caleb said. Grimes nodded as if he had expected it. He turned to go, then turned back. "You will change your mind by October. Eminent domain is a patient process, but it is not a forgiving one." Grimes left. The dust from his buggy hung in the air a long time. Caleb went back to the post hole. At midday, a boy rode out from the Bitter Creek telegraph office. He handed Caleb a slip of yellow paper and waited for payment. Caleb gave him a nickel. The boy tipped his hat and rode away. The telegram was from Galveston. "Dear Cousin Caleb, heard the ranch is struggling. Family is always here. Happy to buy out my brother's share of the property at a fair family price. No interest charged. Let me know. Your cousin, James." No interest. Just half price. Caleb folded the telegram and walked to the house. He opened the drawer of his father's writing desk. Inside were 3 other letters from Cousin James, all from the past 6 months, all saying the same thing in slightly different words. He put the new telegram on top of the pile and shut the drawer. In the early afternoon, Elder Robert Finney drove up in a small gig. He tied his horse to the rail and came up on the porch like a man who had done it many times, which he had. Every 3rd Tuesday of the month, for about 2 years now. Caleb brought him a glass of water. Finney drank half of it and set it on the rail. "Hot one, Caleb." Yes, sir. Crop looking hard. Yes, sir. They sat in silence. The elder's silences were part of his method. They made a man feel he ought to fill them. Caleb did not fill them. After a while, the elder said, "Son, the church is considering expansion. If things with Bannister don't come through, before the land falls to the bank, the church would gladly accept it as a donation. Your name would be remembered. A plaque, perhaps, stone." Caleb said, "My name's already on a stone plaque, elder." The elder raised one eyebrow. "My father's headstone," Caleb said. Finney gave a small, polite laugh. He was not offended. He was a bookkeeper of souls, and had heard worse. "I just want you to know your options, son." "I know my options." The elder stood. He dusted his pants. "The Lord provides, but sometimes the Lord provides through willing hands. Keep that in mind." He drove away. Late in the afternoon, the fourth visitor came. Theodore Bannister, in a covered buggy with the side curtains drawn. His rheumatism was flaring. He did not step down. He slid a piece of paper through the window. "Nothing personal, Caleb." Caleb took the paper. A reminder of the due date. 30 days. "I know." Bannister looked at him. Looked for a second longer than he needed to. Then he said, quieter, "My Lillian's to be married." "I know that too. 6 weeks. Fort Worth. A young doctor. A decent man." "That's good news. $800 for her dowry. That's what I need to find." Caleb said nothing. There was nothing to say. Bannister was not asking for sympathy. He was telling the truth of his life, the same way Caleb would have told him about the drought if he had been asked. Bannister tipped his hat. The buggy rolled away. Caleb sat on the porch step and took off his hat. He held it in his hands and looked at the dust on the crown. 4 men. 4 men had wanted his land in 4 different ways. Not one of them had asked if he had slept the night before. Not one had asked if he had eaten. Not one had asked why his right shoulder sat lower than his left. The mark of a man who had carried weight so long the bones had grown used to it. A thought came to him. He did not put it into words, but it sat under his ribs like a stone. Maybe I am not a man anymore. Maybe I am just the land they want, walking on 2 legs. He put his hat back on. He stood up. He went back to the post hole. He was almost to the bottom when he heard the second buggy. This one came from the south, from the Austin Road. A woman stepped down, a linen dress the color of cream, a wide-brimmed hat faded by sun. Not new. She did not wave. She did not call out. She walked across the yard, past the 2 chickens scratching in the dust. She walked like a woman who had walked a long way to get here and was not about to stop 3 paces short. She stopped 3 paces short. She looked him over. Not the way a buyer looks at a horse, the way a carpenter looks at a beam, checking how much it has already carried. Then she asked the first question. "Are you tired, sir?" Caleb stood still. The shovel was in his hand. He had heard her wrong. He thought she had asked if he was Hartley, if he had a moment. He said, "Pardon?" She said it again. Her voice was level. No pity in it. No softness, even. Just the plain question. "I asked if you were tired, sir." 38 years. He could not remember anyone asking him that since his mother. And his mother had been dead 12 years. He did not have language for that question. He answered with the one he had. "What do you need?" She reached into a cloth bag, pulled out an envelope, held it out. An offer. For the land. He took it, opened it, read. $3,200 for the whole 640 acres, twice the market rate in a drought year. No trap clauses, clean paper. The signature at the bottom was firm and unhurried. Eliza Whitmore. He read the name twice. His father had spoken the name Whitmore once. One rainy night when Caleb was 12, his father, rarely drunk, sitting in the kitchen, not looking at him, speaking to the stove. "I still owe a Whitmore, son. Not money, a thing. When they come, you remember." Caleb closed the envelope, handed it back. "I'm not selling." She did not argue. She did not look surprised. She nodded, as if she had known he would refuse. She turned to go. Caleb did not know why he spoke. It came out of him the way a cough does. "Where are you staying tonight?" She turned back. "Maggie Cole's boarding house, Bitter Creek." He said, "I need a hand, if you need work." She waited. $8 a month, room and board. One condition. Neither of us asks about the other's past for the first 3 months. She nodded, too quickly, as if she had known that too. "I'll come tomorrow." She climbed back into the buggy. It pulled away. Caleb stood in the yard. The dust from her wheels took a long time to die down. Longer than it should have. He picked up the shovel, walked back to the post hole, put the blade in, pushed with his foot. But he did not dig the way he had dug that morning. He did not dig like a man about to lose his land. He dug like a man who had just been asked a question and had not yet answered it. She came at first light, one carpet bag, a smaller cloth bag tied to the handle, no trunk, no hat box. The buggy driver set them on the porch, took his fee, and drove back toward Bitter Creek. Caleb showed her to the room at the back of the house, the one that had been his mother's sewing room. It had a narrow bed, a washstand, a window facing east. He had swept it the night before. He did not tell her that. She set her bag down, looked around, said, "Thank you." He said, "Breakfast at 5. At 5 in the morning, she was in the kitchen before he was. Coffee on the stove, bread sliced, eggs beside the pan, not yet cracked, waiting. He said, "You don't need to cook." She said, "I don't mind." He said, $8 a month does not include cooking." She said, "I know." He ate. She ate. They did not speak again until he set down his fork and said, "Milking." They walked out together. Caleb sat on the right of the first cow. He milked the way his father had taught him. 2 hands, alternating rhythm. Eliza sat on the left of the second cow, but before she touched the animal, she dipped a cloth in warm water from a small pail she had brought out with her, wrung it, laid it over the udder, waited 1 minute. Caleb watched her out of the corner of his eye. He did not ask. She did not explain. When they finished, her pail had about a cup more than his. He said nothing. The next morning, he set down a bowl of warm water before he began, laid a cloth on the udder, waited. Neither of them mentioned it. In the first week, the old cow came up lame, the right hind leg swollen at the hock. Caleb looked at her and shook his head. "I'll drive her to Bitter Creek tomorrow, sell her for slaughter, get $8. Eliza said, "Wait 3 days. He looked at her. She said, "My grandmother used tobacco leaves soaked in vinegar, packed on the joint. 3 days. Caleb said, "I've seen swelling like that. It doesn't go." 3 days. He thought about it. Then he said, 3 days. After that, we go to Bitter Creek. She made the poultice, packed the leg, changed it morning and evening. On the 3rd day, the swelling was still there. The cow was not dead. He did not say, "I told you so." He thought about it. If he had sold her on the first day, he would have lost 3 days of milk. And the cow was his, every pound of her. He walked to the barn, got a fresh bundle of dried tobacco, set it on the kitchen table. He did not say, "Keep working on her." She did not say, "Thank you." That night, eating supper, he realized he had just chosen something. He had chosen to be kind instead of right. He had never thought of those as 2 separate choices before. At the end of the first month, the wind came from the wrong quarter, a dry northwest wind, bringing up dust from 200 miles away. Caleb said, "East Corral, that's where we drive them. Always has been." Eliza said, "North Valley. My mother's journal talks about this wind. It lifts over the east ridge and drops hard into the corral. The valley to the north breaks it." Caleb said, "My father used the East Corral for 30 years. My mother wrote the journal in 1856. They stared at each other across the yard. Neither of them moved. Finally, Caleb said, "Split the herd, half to each." So they did. The storm came that night. The East Corral lost 2 head, the North Valley lost 1, a broken fence in the north, a collapsed shelter in the east. Total, 3 head. If they had gone all one way, it would have been 5. Both of them knew it. Neither of them said it. Over the weeks that followed, the work shaped itself into a rhythm. Caleb set it, and she matched it, and then in small ways she changed it. One afternoon he came in from the field to find she had moved his boots from the porch to just inside the kitchen door. He almost asked her why. Then he saw that she had set them facing the door the way his mother used to. So a man stepping into them in the dark would know which way was out. He did not mention it. The next week he found himself setting her boots there too. He did not mention that either. There was an evening in the 2nd month when they sat on the porch after supper. He sharpened his knife on a whetstone. The stone on steel made a low, even sound. She sat beside him and mended a shirt. The needle went through the cloth with a small, dry rasp. Between the two sounds was silence. It was a different silence than the first week's silence. He had not noticed when it had changed. Once during that evening she looked up and asked him, "Are you more tired today than yesterday?" He stopped. He had never thought about tiredness that way. Tired was tired, like land was land. He said, "Yes." She nodded, went back to her mending. At supper that night, she put an extra spoonful of beans on his plate. None of the 4 men from that first day had ever done that. On the last evening of the 2nd month, Caleb walked out alone to the stunted wheat field. The heads were small, the stems were dry. It would yield maybe a third of what he needed. 32 days until Bannister. He did not tell her. She did not ask. But that night when she set the table, he saw she had set a 3rd place. No plate, just a folded cloth and a cup. He asked, "Expecting someone?" She said, "Just in case." He sat down at his place. She sat at hers. The 3rd place stayed empty all through supper, and neither of them mentioned it. Bannister came back in the 3rd month. This time he stepped down from the buggy. He sat on the porch. Eliza brought him water in a clean glass. He took it with hands that trembled slightly. The rheumatism was bad that week. He drank half the glass, set it on the rail, looked at Caleb. "The note, Caleb." "I know. 22 days." "I know." Bannister glanced at the envelope in his own hands, then at the west fence line. For a second his face changed, just a flicker, a small tightness at the corner of the mouth. Caleb saw it. He did not ask. Bannister said, "I want you to know this is not a pleasure for me. Your father and I were friends. Briefly, a long time ago." Caleb said, "I know that too. My Lillian gets married in 6 weeks. I need the money she brings me, $800. It has to come from somewhere." "Yes, sir." Bannister stood, tied his handkerchief back around his neck. "I will do my duty by the paper, Caleb. I'm sorry for it, but I will do it." He climbed back into the buggy and drove away. Eliza was at the door with a tin pail. She had come out to empty dishwater and had stopped to listen. After the buggy was gone, she set the pail down. She did not ask, "What will you do?" She asked, "Do you want to win this one, or do you want to live here after this one is over?" He looked at her. That was the 3rd question she had asked him that he did not have a ready answer for. He went out to the field. He worked through the afternoon. The sun dropped toward the west fence. When he came back, she had supper on the table. He ate. He said, "The 2nd one." She nodded, like that was the only right answer. 2 days later, Maggie Cole came out with the monthly flour delivery. She drove her wagon into the yard, climbed down. Eliza came out of the kitchen with a dipper for the horse. Maggie looked at her, 1 long second. Then she said, "You have your mother's eyes at the corners. Ann Whitmore, isn't it?" Eliza went still. Caleb was walking in from the barn with a sack of oats on his shoulder. He stopped where he stood. Maggie did not seem to notice. She kept talking. "Your mother taught my boy to read in 1856, before she took sick and went back to Missouri. My boy's a typesetter in Dallas now, raises his own children to read. All because of her." Eliza said, "Yes, ma'am. Anne Whitmore was my mother. Maggie nodded, turned to her wagon, began unloading the flour. I thought so. Same eyes, same way of standing. She finished the delivery, took her money, drove off. Caleb set the sack of oats down on the porch, slower than he needed to. He did not ask her anything. He carried the sack into the kitchen, set it by the pantry. He walked out to the barn and spent the next hour rearranging the tools on the wall. He did not need to. He had arranged them in the spring, but he rearranged them now, carefully. After a while, Eliza came out with a pitcher of water. She set it on the bench, did not leave right away. Caleb said without looking at her, "How long do you need to stay?" She said, "Until I finish what I came here to do." He did not ask what. He kept moving the tools. She stood there another moment, then she went back to the kitchen. That evening, he did the ledger at the kitchen table, adding up figures that did not help him. Feed, seed, wages, a banknote he could not pay. She came in with a cup of tea, set it beside him. She did not leave. She asked, "Are you sleeping?" He looked up. For the second time, he had no ready language. He said, "Not much." She nodded. She did not ask why. She did not give advice. She went out of the kitchen. Half an hour later, he passed through the hall and saw that the hall lamp was still lit. He had always blown it out, kept it dark. Dark was cheaper. The lamp was turned down very low, just a thumbnail of flame, enough to see the floor if a man had to get up in the night. He did not know why. He did not ask. That night he slept 3 hours instead of 1. In the morning he did not mention the lamp. She did not mention it either, but the lamp was on again that night, and the one after that. On Saturday she went to Bitter Creek with the list. Caleb drove her in. He waited outside Doyle's Dry Goods. He was trying to avoid Bannister. Bannister often did his Saturday business on the west end of town, but not always. Caleb stood in the narrow shade under the porch awning. He watched the street. He watched Eliza through the front window of the store. She did her shopping the way she did everything, straight through, no wasted motion. She paid at the counter, tucked the small packages into her basket. She stepped out onto the boardwalk. A woman was coming down the walk from the other direction. A young black woman, a boy of about 14 walking beside her. Caleb knew the woman, Ruth Jenkins. Her husband, Amos, had worked for Caleb 3 seasons until he had taken sick one winter and died in the spring of '76. Caleb had not seen Ruth since the burial. Eliza saw her. She did not hesitate. She walked straight over. She spoke to Ruth like she knew her, like she had known her before. They stood talking on the boardwalk for a good 5 minutes. Ruth's face was turned away from Caleb, but he could see the boy's face. The boy was looking up at Eliza with the careful, closed-off look of a boy who has learned not to ask for things. Then Eliza opened her purse, took out a bill, held it out to Ruth. Ruth shook her head, stepped back. Eliza said something. Ruth shook her head again. Eliza said something else, quieter this time from the way her shoulders moved. Ruth took the bill. Her hand shook a little. From under the awning, Caleb could see the denomination. It was a $50. A ranch hand at Hartley Ridge made $8 a month. Eliza had been paid for 2 months. $16. She could not have gotten $50 out of 16. And she had handed it over like it was the price of a loaf of bread. She stood on the walk a minute longer, talked to the boy, touched his shoulder briefly. Then she turned and came back toward the wagon. Caleb helped her up, loaded the basket behind the seat, clicked to the horse. They drove out of town. On the road back, she talked about the market, prices of things, who had which goods, who had been rude to whom at the post office. Her voice was ordinary. She did not know he had seen, or she knew and was telling him anyway. He did not answer much. He listened to the wheels on the road. He thought about it while he drove. He thought about it while he unhitched the horse. He thought about it while he took the axe to the woodpile and split wood he did not need until the sun was behind the hills. She did not need his money. She had taken $8 a month and hauled water and fed chickens and scrubbed pans as if she needed it. And she had not. He thought about the first day. The $3,200 offer. He had read it in his hand and thought she was a woman who had scraped together everything she had to make a clean offer for land. He had been wrong. She had offered him a fair price because it was fair, not because it was all she had. She had accepted $8 a month because she wanted to stay, not because she needed to. She had not haggled when he said no, because she was not trying to get a bargain. She had come here for something else. He thought, if she does not need the money, what does she need from this land? He drove the axe deep into the block and left it there. At supper, neither of them said anything about the bill. Eliza served the beans and bread. Caleb poured the coffee. He had started pouring hers without being asked a week ago. She had started thanking him for it and then stopped thanking him for it, the way a thing becomes a habit instead of a favor. Near the end of the meal, Eliza set her spoon down. She said, "Did you sleep last night?" He said, "Less than the night before." She nodded. She stood up. She carried the plates to the wash. He sat at the table alone, watching her back. She was counting the nights he slept. In 38 years, no one ever had. The letter from Austin came on a Tuesday. The mail carrier handed it to Caleb at the gate. Yellow envelope. The name of the law firm stamped on the corner. Henderson and Moss, his father's attorneys. Caleb stood at the gate and read it, once, twice. The letter asked him to come to Austin within the next 2 weeks. The firm had recently discovered a portion of the late Harlan Hartley's estate documents that had been misfiled. It was requested that Mr. Caleb Hartley come to the offices in person to clarify certain points. He folded the letter, put it in his pocket. He did not tell Eliza. That evening, after supper, he went into the small room at the back of the house, the room where his father had died. He had not been in it since the funeral. The bed was still made. The dust on the coverlet was thick. The small window faced west. The light was low and red through the dirty pane. He opened the bottom drawer of the bureau, took out a leather-bound book he remembered from boyhood, a book his father used to write in at night, after supper, when he thought Caleb was asleep. Caleb sat on the bed and opened the book. It was not a diary. It was a stack of letters, folded, some sealed, some open, all in his father's hand. None of them had been sent. He read them slowly. The third one stopped him. It was dated 1858. The paper was yellow. The ink was faded but legible. It was addressed to Anne. He read the first line. "Anne, if you are reading this, it means I did not keep my word. Forgive me. Let Lorraine finish it for me. Lorraine." Caleb sat on the edge of the bed and held the letter in his hand. He did not cry. He did not shout. He did not move. He sat. He looked at a point on the wall where the plaster had cracked in a shape like a crooked river. He breathed very slowly. For 20 years he had believed his father's promise had been to hold the land. For 20 years he had planted and dug and fought debt and told himself he was keeping his father's word. The word had been something else. The word had been to finish something that was not finished, with a woman who was not his mother, on a piece of land his father had never farmed. He had been carrying the wrong thing for 20 years, and he was so tired. He did not know how long he sat. After a while, he heard Eliza walk past the door. She did not come in. She did not call his name. She did not knock. The footsteps passed. A long while later, he heard her outside, the squeak of the well rope, the clang of the milk pail, the soft whine of the chicken coop door swinging on its hinge. She was doing the evening chores, his evening chores. She did not say anything about it. Around 11, he stood up. His knees hurt from the way he had been sitting. He put the book back in the drawer, shut the drawer, went out of the room. The house was still. One lamp on in the hall turned low. He walked through the kitchen to the back door. He went out to the well, drew up a bucket, splashed water on his face. Eliza was sitting on the porch. She did not stand up when he came around the corner. She did not turn her head. There was a glass of water on the wooden step beside her. She had drawn it already. From when he had come out of the room, he took the glass, he drank it, he sat down beside her, not close, Close enough. The night was quiet. A dog barked somewhere far off toward Bitter Creek. After a while, he said, not looking at her, "I have been keeping the wrong thing for 20 years. She did not ask what thing. She did not say, "That isn't so." She did not say, "You did your best." She said, "Are you tired?" It was the third time she had asked it. This time he was not startled. This time he had the language. He said, "Yes." She said, "How long?" He thought about it. "Since my father died. 20 years. She nodded. She did not say anything for a while. Then she said, "Then tonight is the first of 7,000 nights someone has known." He did not answer. He did not need to. They sat there until the moon crossed the top of the sky. When she stood up to go inside, she bent down to tighten the laces of her boot. Something fell out of her outer pocket, a folded piece of cloth, an old handkerchief. She picked it up quickly, tucked it back. But he had seen the embroidered letters at the corner. L.W. 1858. Lorraine Whitmore. 1858. The year his father had written the letter he never sent. He went inside. He lay down on his bed. He did not sleep. But for the first time in 20 years, not sleeping was not because of the weight. He was thinking. He went to Austin 3 days later. The firm of Henderson and Moss had its offices on Congress Street, in a narrow brick building with a plaque by the door. A young clerk showed him up the stairs. A man in a gray coat met him in the inner office. The man did not waste time. He handed Caleb a sealed envelope. "This was deposited by your father in 1870, 8 years before his death. The instructions were specific. It was to be delivered to you only when a second party inquired about ownership of a specific 12-acre parcel near Mill Creek." Caleb said, "Has someone inquired?" The lawyer said, "A Miss Eliza Whitmore, about 4 months ago, through a Missouri agent." 4 months ago, before she had come to Hartley Ridge, before she had stepped down from the buggy and asked him if he was tired. Caleb took the envelope. He did not open it in the office. He thanked the lawyer. He walked down the stairs into the Austin street. He went to a bench on the Capitol lawn and opened it there. Inside were 3 things: a hand-drawn map of the 12 acres near Mill Creek, his own land. The corner he had never plowed because of the old stone footings. An unfinished contract, dated 1857, signed by Harlan Hartley, signed by Ann Whitmore, a third line for a witness blank, and a single sheet in his father's handwriting. "This is the land for the school. Harlan and Ann. Not finished." Caleb sat on the bench. He watched a boy chase a hoop down the sidewalk. He watched a woman cross the street with a parasol. He watched the Texas flag move on the pole above the Capitol. He thought, "I have been walking on a schoolhouse for 20 years. He folded the papers and put them back in the envelope. On the way home, he stopped in Bitter Creek. He went into Maggie Cole's boarding house. He asked her for a cup of coffee. She brought it. She sat down across from him. She had known his father. She had known everybody's father. He said, "Mrs. Cole, what year did Eliza's mother come here?" Maggie looked at him for a long moment before she answered. 1855. 23 years old. She came alone, no husband, no brother. People talked, but I knew why she came. Tell me." She wanted to teach reading, not just the white children. Ruth's mother's people, the black families down by the river. The Mendoza children out at the Abbott place, the Mexican hands. The children of Grandmother Sparrow. Grandmother Sparrow. Mixed-blood Comanche woman, lived past the creek, kept a garden, kept to herself. Had grandchildren who were half Irish and no one to teach them their letters. Caleb put his cup down. Ann Whitmore used to say, "Children don't choose their parents. They just need to learn to read." Maggie leaned her elbows on the table. "She met your father when she was out looking for land. He gave her the 12 acres at Mill Creek. They dug the footings, had the stones hauled. Then she took sick. Lungs. The dry air would not let her breathe. She went back to Missouri. Your father promised to hold the land until she came back. She didn't come back. She had Eliza, and then she died, 2 years after she left. And my father never finished the school. No. Why? Maggie looked at him. Because he would not build it alone, Caleb. It was not his to build alone. Caleb stared at the coffee in front of him. He had not drunk any of it. After a long moment, he said, "Did Anne Whitmore leave anything?" "For her daughter," Maggie said. "One thing." "What?" "One," Maggie said slowly. "She told Lorraine that when someone comes asking for help, you do not ask them what they have. You ask them if they are tired." Caleb looked up. "She used it with her students," Maggie said. "The black students on their first day. They were afraid no one would look at them as people. Anne Whitmore looked. She asked them if they were hungry, if they had slept, if they were tired, before she asked them to read. And she raised her daughter to do the same." Yes. Caleb paid for the coffee he had not drunk. He rode home. He got back to the ranch at dusk. He did not go to the house. He walked around it. He walked out to the 12 acres at Mill Creek. Eliza was there. She was on her knees by the old stone footings. She had a trowel. She was clearing weeds and packed dirt from between the stones, setting them true. She had been doing this many times. She had been doing it when he was out on the east fence, when he was in town, every time his back was turned. She heard him coming. She stood up. She did not speak. She waited. Caleb turned around. He walked back to the house. He sat at the kitchen table, the one with the cracked board from the week before. He put his hands flat on the wood. He thought, "Father, you never told me." He thought, "I nearly drove her off in the first month." He thought, "I am not Harlan Hartley's son. I am the man who got in the way of Harlan Hartley's word." He hit the table with the flat of his hand, hard. The crack split another inch along its length. His hand bled from where a splinter had caught him. He wrapped it in a rag from the drawer. He did not tell Eliza. He did not speak to her for 2 days. He worked. He walked the fence. He repaired the chicken coop. He watched himself doing these things the way a man watches somebody else do them. He was not angry with her. He was not angry with his father. He was redrawing a map of who he had been. On the 3rd day after breakfast, he walked out to the 12 acres. She was there again. He sat down beside her. He had brought a hammer from the barn, and the envelope from Austin. He said, "We work on it?" She looked at the envelope. She looked at the hammer. She said, "Yes." He opened the envelope, laid the 1857 contract down on a flat stone. He took a pencil from his pocket. He signed his name on the 3rd line, the witness line. Then he held out the pencil to her. "Sign as your mother's heir." She took the pencil. She signed underneath his name, Eliza Whitmore, 1878. Before he picked up the hammer, she looked at his bandaged hand. "Is it still hurting?" "A little." She nodded. She picked up the trowel. They began to work. They worked the old footings for 10 days. They cleared the weeds. They reset the stones that had shifted. They hauled new stone from a ledge up the creek. They mixed mortar in a wooden trough. Caleb had not built with stone since he was a boy. His father had built the chimney of the main house. Caleb had held the bucket. Now he remembered things he had not known he remembered. The way his father angled a stone to lock it against the one below. The way his father wet the mortar to a certain thickness. No wetter, no drier. His hands remembered. Eliza worked beside him. She was strong for her size. She did not tire quickly. She did not complain. On the 10th day, they were mixing mortar together. He stood on one side of the trough. She stood on the other. They pulled the hoe through the mix in alternating strokes. She began to speak. She was not speaking to him exactly. She was speaking as if to the ground. "My mother did not just want to build a school. She wanted to build it from the stone on this land. She said the stones here had seen enough to teach children what they needed to know." Caleb pulled the hoe through the mix. Did not answer. She had a list. 27 children she had taught in this region before she left. Some were black, some were Mexican, some were mixed-blood Comanche, Some were white children of poor folks that no one else would teach. He pulled the hoe again. She said if the school was finished, each one of them would have a chance. She never forgot them. When she was dying, she did not talk about me. She said, 27 children. Lorraine. Remember the 27? He stopped mixing. I was the 28th, Eliza said. I was not on her list. He looked at her. She did not look up. I did not come here to stay. I came to finish the list, build the school, find the 27 who are still alive, bring them here for a term, long enough for each of them to know someone remembered them, then go. She pulled the hoe once through the mortar. There is a boy named Isaac, 14 years old, Ruth's son. I promised his mother I would take him to Chicago, the Quaker school for colored children. I have already paid his fare. I have to go with him. After Isaac, there are 2 more in New Orleans, 1 in San Francisco. There are children I have not yet found. She set the hoe down. It is a 10-year plan. Caleb listened. He did not interrupt. He did not move. When she was done, he pulled the hoe through the mortar himself. Once, twice, evenly. After a few minutes, he said, "We need more water." That was all he said. She went to get more water. He thought about it for the rest of the day. If she was going to leave because she had to take Isaac to Chicago, then after she had taken Isaac to Chicago, she could come back. If the school was large enough and solid enough, she would have a reason to come back. So he would build it larger, and he would build it faster than she could. While she was still planning with him, he would quietly build ahead of the plan. By the time she came back from Chicago with the boy safely delivered, the school would be ready. He did not tell her. He began to work at night. He would wait until she went to sleep. Then he would light a lantern, go out to the site, dig more foundation, haul stones, lay course on course. He worked by moonlight and lamplight. 3 nights, 4. On the 5th morning, as they walked out to the site after breakfast, she stopped. There was a new stack of dressed stone by the wall, a stack that had not been there the evening before. She looked at it. She looked at him. She did not speak. He did not speak. She understood. He could see her understanding. She understood that he had not understood her. He had thought she was leaving and coming back. She was leaving. And after Isaac, there would be another leaving. And after that, another. She looked at the new stack of stones. She thought, if I tell him the truth now, he will stop building. She thought, I do not want him to stop. Not because she would come back, because for the first time in her life, someone was treating her return as something worth building toward. And she wanted to see it built, even if she was never going to come back to live in it. She did not tell him. For 3 days, she said nothing. She worked beside him by day. She pretended not to notice the new stones he had laid by night. He worked himself thinner. He came in from the night hours red-eyed. She saw it and said nothing. On the 4th morning, a boy rode up from Bitter Creek. Telegram. Ruth Jenkins had sent word through the telegraph office. Isaac has a fever. Doctor says weak lungs. Need to travel north before winter. Can leave on the 6 o'clock train Friday. Will you come? Friday was the next day. Eliza read the telegram twice. She folded it. She said to Caleb, I have to leave tomorrow. He put down his tools. He said, How long? I don't know. 6 weeks? 6 months? Maybe longer. You will come back? She did not answer. He looked at her. He looked at the way she was standing, at the way she was holding the telegram. He saw it, not through her answer, through her shoulders. She was not coming back. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He said, I will finish it. If you come back, it is here. If you don't, it is here for someone else. He said it the way a man tells his own hand to open, slowly, certainly. Then after a moment he said, Did you sleep last night? She broke, not loud. One tear down one cheek. She turned her head away. It was the first time he had ever asked her that. In the months she had been at Hartley Ridge, she had asked him 10 times. She had counted his nights. He had never once asked her. He was asking now, on the night before she had to leave. She said, "Not much." He said, "Me neither." They worked the rest of that day in silence. They ate supper without talking. She packed her carpet bag. She laid out her traveling clothes on the chair. Before she blew out the lamp that night, she walked past his room. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, boots off, hands on his knees. She did not go in. She stood in the doorway. "Good night, Caleb." He looked up. "Good night." She went to her room. He sat on the edge of the bed a long time. In the morning, he drove her to Bitter Creek. She boarded the stage for the station at Fort Worth. From there, the train to St. Louis. From there, Chicago. At the stage step, she turned back. She said, "Are you tired?" He said, "Yes, but not today." She nodded. She got on the stage. The stage left. He stood in the road until the dust died. Both of them believed this was the kindest choice they could make for the other. Both of them were almost right. 4 weeks passed. Caleb hired 2 new hands. Jacob, a former Union soldier looking for steady work. Miles, the son of an old ranch hand Caleb had known since he was a boy. He paid them with money borrowed from a small bank in Fort Worth, not from Bannister. He had negotiated a 6-month extension with Bannister, pledging the east parcel as collateral. The east was thin soil and little worth. Bannister had accepted because he knew Caleb would keep his word. In those 4 weeks, 3 of the men from that first day came back. Grimes first. He raised his offer to $2,400. Caleb said, "No." Grimes said, "The company is finalizing the route. You should close now." Caleb said, "No." He did not explain. He did not argue. Grimes was a man used to other men counting the money. He was not used to a man who did not count it at all. Grimes left. Finney came next. He sat on the porch the way he always did. He drank his water. He said, "Son, word is you're building something." Caleb said, "A school, elder." Finney's eyebrows rose politely. "Indeed?" "Open to every child in the county. That includes Ruth Jenkins' boy. That includes the Mendoza family. That includes whoever comes." Finney set his glass down carefully. "That is ambitious, son." "Would you like to be the first to put your name on the subscription list, elder?" Finney did not answer for a moment. Then he stood up. He said, "I'll think on it." He did not put his name down. He did not come back. Cousin James sent one more letter. The language was not so gentle this time. There were phrases in it about the duty of a man to his family, about foolish pride, about what fathers had wanted for their sons. Caleb read it once. He folded it. He walked to the kitchen stove and put it in. The stone schoolhouse went up through October. Stone walls chest high, then shoulder high, then the door frame, then the window frames, then the rafters, a wooden door of oak planks, a blackboard hauled in from Fort Worth. 6 benches built in his own barn from boards cut at the Bitter Creek mill. A small brass bell on an iron bracket by the door. At the end of October, he hung the bell. He stood inside the finished room. The late sun came through the west window. It made a square on the floor. He stood in the middle of the square. The room was empty. No teacher, no students. He understood then. Really understood. What he had built could not exist without the people to use it, without a teacher, without children. It was a stone room. He had built it for one person. Without her, it was a thing. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Eliza had taken Isaac to the Quaker school. The teachers were kind. The other boys made room for him at the table. Within 3 weeks, his fever had broken, and he was reading aloud to the class from a primer. She stayed in a small boarding house near the school. She went every day to see him. She watched him settle. On the 20th day, she sat in her boarding house room. She had a list in her lap, a list her mother had written in 1860. 27 names. Some she had already found. Some she had already crossed out because they had died. Isaac was the 3rd she had placed. She took her pencil. She drew a line through Isaac's name. 24 names left. She stared at the list. She thought about her mother. For the first time she thought, my mother had Texas. Her mother had lived with the idea of the 27, but her mother had also lived with the Red River and the mesquite trees. and the dust coming up off the road. She had lived with Harlan Hartley, and the quiet argument of whether or not to mortar a stone true the first time, or let it settle a season. Her mother had not had only a list. Her mother had had a place. Eliza was good at separating mission from life. In theory, she had been confusing them in practice. She had come too far to turn back easily. 24 names, 24 journeys, maybe 10 years. She folded the list. She put it back in the envelope. She did not know what she was going to do. Back in Texas, Caleb rode into Bitter Creek and went to the church. Not to Finney. Finney was not the man he wanted. He went to the parsonage behind the church where old Reverend Samuel Odell lived. Odell was 60. He had buried Caleb's father. He also made the coffins, because the town did not have a separate undertaker. Caleb sat in the parson's small kitchen. He said, "Reverend, is there anything else? Anything my father wrote that I haven't seen?" Odell looked at him. For a long moment, then he stood up. He went into his study. He came back with a small envelope. The envelope was sealed with old wax. "Your father wrote this 3 weeks before he died. He gave it to me. He said to hold it until you came and asked. He said only until Caleb asks." Caleb broke the seal. It was a short letter, in his father's hand. To Caleb. "This land is not left to you by inheritance in the ordinary sense. It is held in trust. The condition is this. The 12-acre parcel near Mill Creek must be used to build a school for children of every color, every origin, within 20 years of my death. If this is not done, the whole of Hartley Ridge passes to the descendants of Ann Whitmore. If there is no Whitmore living, the land passes to the church in Bitter Creek, to be sold and the money distributed among the county schools. I did not tell you this while I was alive, son. I was afraid you would keep it out of duty, not out of understanding. I am gone now. You will decide for yourself. I love you. Harlan." Caleb sat in the small kitchen. He held the letter. He counted. From 1858 to 1878. 20 years. This year. If the school had not been finished this year, the land would have gone to Eliza whether she had known it or not. He had built it. The condition was satisfied. The land was his. But the true condition was not the condition the law would read. His father had not written, "Keep the land if you build the school." He had written, "This land is held in trust for this purpose." The purpose was only fulfilled when there was a school, with a teacher, with children. Without Eliza, the stone room was only a stone room. He could not keep the land and let her leave, not because of law, because the nature of the land had bound those two things together since before he was born. He thanked Reverend Odell. He rode home. That night he sat at the kitchen table by the light of one lamp. He wrote a short letter. He sealed it. He rode to Austin at dawn. At the office of Henderson and Moss, he signed a deed. 50% of Hartley Ridge from Caleb Hartley to Eliza Whitmore, without condition, without reversal. He had the deed notarized. He took the document with him. Then he went to the station and bought a ticket to Chicago. He did not send a telegram. He did not write ahead. He simply got on the train. Fort Worth to St. Louis. St. Louis to Chicago. 5 days on the train. Caleb had never traveled farther than Austin. He had no city coat. He wore his father's old leather overcoat, the one he had only ever worn to funerals or in the hardest winter. In his inside pocket, he carried 3 things. The 1857 contract signed by his father and Ann Whitmore, the postscript to the will in his father's hand, the deed of transfer of 50% of Hartley Ridge to Eliza Whitmore. He had signed the deed before he left Austin. He had done it before he knew whether she would see him. In Chicago, he asked directions 3 times. He found the Quaker School for Colored Children in a quiet part of the city 2 blocks from a small park, a low brick building, a fenced yard behind it. A Quaker woman in a gray dress answered at the front office. She looked at him without suspicion and without welcome, both of which relieved him. He said, "I am looking for Miss Eliza Whitmore. She is in the backyard with Isaac Jenkins." May I see her? I will tell her you are here. What is your name? Caleb Hartley. The woman went. He waited in the hallway. He took off his hat. He smoothed the brim. Eliza came up the corridor. She was in a gray dress, too. Her sleeves were rolled. She had a piece of chalk in her hand. She stopped at the end of the corridor when she saw him. He did not know what to do with his face. She walked the rest of the way, stopped 3 paces short, the way she had that first afternoon in his yard. Caleb. Eliza. Isaac is in the yard. I won't keep you long. Come out. She led him through the back. Isaac was at a wooden table under an oak tree. He had a copybook open. He was writing with careful, slow strokes. Isaac looked up. He saw Caleb. The boy's face changed. Not much. Just enough to show he had heard Caleb's name. Mr. Hartley. Isaac. Isaac stood. He was polite. He was 14. He said, I will go inside for a moment. I need to ask Sister Mary about a word. He walked toward the building, slow enough that he was giving them the yard. Caleb and Eliza stood under the oak. Caleb said, I brought something. He took out the envelope with the deed. He held it out. She took it. She opened it. She read. She read it twice. Her hands began to shake very slightly. She said, Caleb. He said, I have not come to ask you to come back. She did not look up from the deed. I have come to ask you something else, and you have every right to say no. She looked up. What you are doing, the 24 children you still have to find, is there a place in it for me? He had rehearsed the words on the train. They did not come out the way he had rehearsed them. They came out smaller. He had not rehearsed for how small his voice would be. I am not asking you to come back to Hartley Ridge and wait for me. I am asking to go with you. 24 children is 24 journeys. I have Jacob and Miles now. They can run the ranch. I can be gone 2 months at a time. More if it is needed. She stared at him. I don't know if it fits your plan. You have every right to say no. But I wanted to ask. Because if I did not ask, I would carry the not asking the rest of my life. He stopped. He did not add anything. He did not plead. He stood there with his hat in his hand. She looked at the deed in her other hand. She understood. He had signed over half the land before he came. He had given her freedom before he had asked for company. Even if she said no, she would still own half of Hartley Ridge. She could do her 24 journeys. She could walk away from him and never come back. The land was hers whether she chose him or not. He had made sure she did not have to choose him out of obligation. She did not say yes. She did not say no. She looked at the oak tree. She looked at the schoolhouse door where Isaac had gone in. She said, Do you know cursive? He blinked. Some. My mother taught me. Good. Isaac is writing a letter to Ruth. He writes slowly. I have been sitting on one side of him. You sit on the other. He can have 2 helpers. They went inside. Isaac came back with Sister Mary's answer about a word. He sat down at the wooden table. Eliza sat on his left. Caleb sat on his right. The 3 of them bent their heads over the paper. Isaac wrote. Eliza corrected the spelling. Caleb drew a small arrow in the margin to show where a word was missing. There was no embrace. There was no kiss. No one said, I love you. There were 3 people in a sheet of paper, and an address at the top. Mrs. Ruth Jenkins, Bitter Creek, Texas. That was the answer. That evening, Eliza walked Caleb to the boarding house where she was staying. It was 2 streets over. She did not invite him in. She stopped at the door. I cannot promise I will come back to Texas. I know. 24 children. It could be 10 years. It could be longer. You do not have to promise. But I can promise this. Every month, wherever I am, I will write you a letter. You can answer or not. When I am done, if you are still there, I will come home. I will be there. She nodded. She opened the door. She did not invite him in. She did not close it either. She stood on the threshold. Then she said, Have you eaten? It was the sixth question. The first was, "Are you tired?" This one was, "Have you eaten?" In 38 years, 2 women had ever asked him those kinds of questions. His mother and her. He shook his head. She said, "Come in." 7 months went by. Eliza and Caleb traveled together to Memphis. They found a girl from her mother's list, now a grown young woman with 2 children of her own. They did not bring her back. That was not the point. They brought her a letter from Ann Whitmore, a letter Ann had written when she was dying. A letter that said in Ann's shaky hand, "I taught you to read because I wanted you to know you were worth teaching. Remember that." The young woman read it. She cried. She folded it and put it in her apron pocket. She walked them to the door of her small brick house and said, "Thank you." She said it 3 times. They found one in New Orleans. That one they did bring back to the Hartley Whitmore School for a term. A shy boy, 17 years old, who had never held a book in his hands. They found one in a town south of Galveston. They did not find the one in San Francisco. Not that year. Eliza wrote Caleb 8 letters while she was between journeys. He answered 6. 2 he started but never finished because he did not know what to say when she wrote that a child named Samuel had died of smallpox in Arkansas before she could reach him. Some things he did not have the words for. He learned not to pretend he did. In May of 1879, she came home to Hartley Ridge for the summer. 2 months. She brought the updated list. 20 children left. On a Saturday afternoon in early June, the community gathered at the schoolhouse. It was not a wedding. There was no ring. There was no preacher saying words over them. What there was a sheet of parchment and a wooden table. Maggie Cole came. Reverend Odell came. Ruth Jenkins came, back from Chicago for the summer, now that Isaac was well settled at the Quaker school. Jacob and Miles came. 14 of the morning students came with their families. Hannah Morgan, the young teacher Eliza had hired from St. Louis, stood by the bell. Even Theodore Bannister came. He had paid Lillian's dowry in March and watched her marry her young doctor. He stood at the back. He did not come forward, but he came. On the table was the parchment. It read in clear, plain script, "The Hartley Whitmore School, held jointly by Caleb Hartley and Eliza Whitmore, in perpetual trust for the education of children of every origin in Brazos County." They signed. Caleb first, Eliza after. Reverend Odell witnessed. Maggie Cole witnessed. Jacob witnessed. Miles witnessed. There were no vows. There were signatures. There were people who knew them, and there were people those people would tell. In West Texas in 1879, a public act before your neighbors was a stronger binding than a ring. This was their marriage. After the signing, Maggie Cole asked if she could say something. Caleb nodded. Maggie stood up. She was 67. She held her hands folded at her waist. "There is something I want to tell you all. Something my mother told me when I was young. It was told to her by a woman who was old when my mother was young." The yard quieted. Even the children. In 1834, before Texas was a state, when this country was still disputed between Mexico and the settlers, there was a woman. Her name was Sparrow. She was of mixed blood. Her mother was Comanche. Her father was a white trader. She had a husband named Connor, an Irishman. He had come west looking for land. The breeze moved through the oak leaves above them. Sparrow and Connor wanted to build a school, a small one, for their own children and the children like them. Children who did not belong neatly in any one world. They dug the first footings for a schoolhouse on a piece of ground near a creek, right here. Eliza turned her head, looked at Caleb. Then the war came in 1836. Connor went to fight. He died at the Alamo. Sparrow took her children and went back to her mother's people. No one knows where she died. No one knows if her children had children. Maggie paused. The footings were buried over. Grass grew on them. When Harlan Hartley came and settled this land in 1842, he did not know he was building his main house 100 feet from them. When Ann Whitmore came in 1855 and walked this ground with Harlan, they found the stones. They thought they had found a place. They thought they were the first. She looked at Caleb, then at Eliza. They were the second. Maggie's voice was steady. Now you two are the third. You have built the school. You have opened it. You have put the bell on the door and the children on the benches. She smiled. A small smile. The smile of a woman who had lived long enough to see some things finished. This land has waited long enough for someone to stay. A small murmur passed through the people. Someone near the back blew their nose into a handkerchief. Hannah Morgan rang the brass bell. Once, twice, a third time. The children cheered. Eliza stood beside Caleb. She looked at the 14 students on the schoolhouse steps. She thought of her mother's list, 27 who had not had a chance. 14 of them represented here. 3 already placed in distant schools by her own hand. 20 still to find. And before her mother, Sparrow and Connor, who had dug the first footing and lost everything to a war. Legacy, she thought, is not an estate. Legacy is a promise no one has yet finished. Each generation carries it another stretch. Caleb thought of the first question she had asked him. On the day she had stepped down from the buggy with an envelope in her hand. Not, how many acres do you have? Not, what is the price? But, are you tired? Everyone else had wanted his money. She was the only one who had asked if he was tired. And it was not because she was kinder than they were. It was because her mother had taught her. If you want to know who someone is, ask if they are tired. Do not ask what they have. That was the inheritance she had received from Ann Whitmore. Not money. A question. And now, at the Hartley Whitmore School, Hannah Morgan asked it of the children every morning. Before reading, before writing, before the slate and the chalk. Are you tired? Did you sleep? Are you hungry? Because no one learns their letters if no one first asks whether they are a person. The ceremony ended in the late afternoon. The families walked or rode back toward their homes. The children raced each other down the dirt track toward Bitter Creek. Isaac Jenkins stayed. He was spending his summer at Hartley Ridge with Eliza and Caleb and his mother Ruth. He walked up to the main house to start supper. The sun began to drop. It was 4 o'clock, the dog's breath hour, the same time of day as the one when Caleb had been digging a post hole 10 months earlier, alone. Caleb looked at the west fence. The post hole he had been digging that day was long since finished. But there was a new stretch of fence to run that summer, out past the old line, to enclose the new pasture. The first post hole of it sat waiting. He picked up a shovel from the porch. He began to walk out. Eliza followed. She picked up the second shovel, the one he had bought for her the week after she had first come to Hartley Ridge, the one she had used all those months. They walked out to the new fence line together. They began to dig, side by side. The shovels bit dry earth. The sound was still like something biting down on bone. But there were 2 sounds now, not one, slightly offset, rising and falling in a rhythm neither of them had set, a rhythm that had set itself. 10 months ago, one man had dug a post hole alone. Now there were 2 pairs of hands. The sun dropped lower. Their shadows stretched east toward the house, toward the lamp in the kitchen window that Isaac had just lit. The hole was done. They dropped the post, packed the dirt around it. Caleb straightened up. He rested the shovel against his boot. He looked at Eliza. He did not ask her if she was tired. He said, "Let's go in for supper." She nodded. They walked back toward the house together. The west wind had died. The air was cooling. Somewhere out beyond the north pasture, a killdeer called. At the porch, Isaac opened the door. The smell of bread and bean stew came out with him. Caleb stood on the step a moment. He looked up at the sky. At the first star just showing over the ridge, he thought, "Father, I understand now." Then he followed Eliza inside. Behind them in the schoolhouse, a quarter-mile away, the brass bell hung still. Tomorrow it would ring at 8 in the morning. 14 children would come up the path. Hannah Morgan would open the door and stand at the threshold and ask them one at a time as they came in, "Are you tired? Did you sleep? Are you hungry?" And the lessons would begin. This work of fiction is a product of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events or locales, is purely coincidental. The narrative is intended solely for artistic and entertainment purposes and should not be interpreted as a reflection of real individuals or factual occurrences.
Before we close this story, let us sit with it for a moment. Because a story like this one is not told just to fill an afternoon. It is told to leave something behind in the heart of the listener. There was a man in West Texas who thought his worth was measured by the acres under his feet. 4 visitors came to him in a single day, and every one of them wanted what he owned. The railroad wanted his land for its tracks. His cousin wanted it for a bargain. The church wanted it for a plaque on a wall. The banker wanted it for a debt. And in all their wanting, not one of them stopped to see the man himself. Not one of them noticed that his right shoulder sat lower than his left. Not one asked if he had slept. Not one asked if he had eaten. They looked at him, and they saw a transaction. They did not see a person. Then she came. A woman who had nothing to gain from him. A woman whose mother had taught her the oldest and gentlest rule of being alive. That when you meet another human being, you do not ask them what they have. You ask them if they are tired, because that is the question that returns a person to themselves. This is a story about dignity, about what we owe each other when we meet. A person is not a piece of land. A person is not a ledger. A person is a living soul carrying weight we cannot always see. And the first act of love, sometimes the only act that matters, is to notice the weight. This is also a story about legacy, about what we truly leave behind when we are gone. Harlan Hartley believed he was leaving his son land. What he was really leaving was an unfinished promise. A schoolhouse meant for every child, of every color, of every origin. And before Harlan, there had been others. A Comanche woman and an Irishman in 1834. Before them, perhaps others still. Each generation carries the promise another stretch of the way, and no one carries it alone, and no generation finishes it by itself. What we call inheritance is not an estate. It is a torch, passed in the dark, from a hand that is tired to a hand that is younger. And finally, this is a story about healing. Because exhaustion, left unwitnessed, becomes a stone a man carries until it breaks him. But exhaustion, seen and named by one other person, becomes something a man can finally set down. So if you take one thing from this story tonight, let it be this. Somewhere near you, right now, there is a person carrying too much. You do not have to fix them. You do not have to save them. You only have to ask the question. Are you tired? That is where love begins. That is where every school, every family, every community, and every promise worth finishing must begin. And from that question, everything else becomes possible.